All right, welcome to a special episode of LawNext. I am at the Clio Cloud Conference in Nashville, and I'm recording a series of interviews here with some of the both Clio people and Clio users who are here at the conference. And right now, I am joined by Joshua Lenon. Joshua, how are you?
I am great, Bob. It's great to be back at the conference, and it's great to be speaking with you.
It's great to be speaking with you. And Joshua is the lawyer in residence at Clio, celebrating his 10th anniversary with the company. Congratulations on that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's the 10th Clio Cloud Conference and my 10-year anniversary, so it's nice to have them both coincide.
Yeah, and if it sounds familiar, yes, he was just on the our Legal Tech Week roundtable recently also, where we had him as a guest panelist, and he talked a little bit about his time at Clio and also engaged with the other panelists there. But were you at the first Clio? You were, because I saw your picture this morning.
Yeah,
that's right.
I have
You were the crazy guy with his arms up in the...
Yeah, that was me. The lawyer at Clio was the crazy guy waving his arms. Yeah, I've been at every Clio Cloud Conference. I'm one of 3 Cleons that can now say that.
Yeah, and I've been at everyone. And
yeah.
in front of you in that picture of raising your crazy arms, you can see this like gray silver-haired person, because my hair has been white since like my 30s.
The distinctive profile of Bob Ambrogi.
Yeah, there it is. So I stand out in crowds, if nothing else. Anyway, so what I want to talk to you about here is the Legal Trends Report. This is the 7th year in which Clio has done the Legal Trends Report. Jack made a comment Jack Newton in his opening keynote this morning that this has really become kind of the document of record. I forget the word he used for it, but in terms of tracking trends in the legal industry, and it really has. And it really, before the first Clio Trends Report, part of the reason this was so fascinating the first year it came out is there wasn't a lot of data out there on really what was happening in law practice, and this has really changed that. Yeah,
what we saw was a lot of the kind of the traditional publishers, your Wexus, they would do a survey of big law lawyers, and whatever the results of that 100 big law lawyers they could get to answer their questions, that was presumed to be the entirety of the legal industry. And Clio's Legal Trends Report, which relies upon actual data from usage of Clio. So not even the lawyer's case files or anything like that. We can't see that. But just the usage of Clio has given us so much insight into the practice of law that never existed before. One example is every year we publish the Billable Hour Index. And if you download the report, you can actually see it broken down by state and by practice area. So family law lawyers in Indiana charge this number versus family law lawyers in Maine and Massachusetts charge a different number. And prior to that being published, your best bet for getting anything close to that information was to ask a couple of people down the hall and hope they knew what they were talking about. And now we actually have data over time showing what lawyers charge and where. And what sizes of firms are getting profiled in this Legal Trends Report? So it's all contributed data. So every customer in Clio actually has the ability to opt out of this. But just like Clio's user base represents the legal industry, where the majority of lawyers are in solo and small law firms, you have kind of that gap in the middle, and then big law. Clio's user base actually reflects that same kind of graph, where the majority of our users are solo and small. We've got a good chunk of the middle market right now, and also even some firms, some big law firms are using Clio in different practice groups. So we are able to get an insight across the legal industry in this report.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about the report and what it is, but let's dive into what it found this year and talk more about that. You've looked at a number of different factors, or made findings about a number of different factors. Actually, let me back up, because now I remember what I was about to ask before we just heard a noise in the background that interrupted me. Was you pull this data you pull user data out from actual Clio users, and you're able to get very precise information on billing and time spent and other types of things. In past years, there's also been a client survey or a consumer survey that's been part of this. Was that also part of it?
Absolutely, yeah. We actually survey lawyers, and both Clio customers and non-Clio customers, and clients and potential clients, people who have had a legal issue but may not have hired a lawyer. Because we find that the data often raises more questions than answers. It'll tell us the what but not the why. And so in order to figure out the why, we turn to these surveys, which are always at least 1,000 of each of the subjects that we're researching, in order to make sure we get a really broad representation. That's actually done by my colleague Nika, who handles a lot of our surveys, along with Simona. And anyone who attended our Legal Trends presentation saw me actually thank the entire team of individuals who make this. And these surveys really do kind of flesh out our understanding of what we're seeing and help us better translate the numbers into a story.
Right. So probably one of the most significant things about the survey this year is simply the timing. It's the survey that is showing the state of the legal profession as we are, knock on wood, emerging from this pandemic that has probably forever changed the shape of the legal profession. So, I mean, before we get to some of the specifics on it, was there kind of a headline for you? What most jumped out at you about the findings this year in the survey?
So one of the big headlines for me was that law firms haven't just recovered from the pandemic, but are actually experiencing some really phenomenal growth. We've seen that the number of new matters being created by law firms is 25% higher than it was back at this time in 2019. Back before things got crazy. We see that a number of hours billed and the number of hours that are put on the bill, because those are two different things, right, are increased by 35 and 36%. And new revenue collected by law firms has increased 45% over what we saw back in 2019. So it's not just that law firms are getting back to normal. Something has changed for the good of law firms.
Is there anything in either the data or the surveys that suggests what that something might be?
Absolutely. We looked at billable rates. Billable rates for lawyers have only increased about 4% year over year. It does not account for a 31% increase on average in revenue. And so we then look to our key performance indicators. Those are three metrics: utilization rate, realization rate, and collection rate, where we measure how much of a day a lawyer works as billable time, how much of that billable time do they actually pass on to the client, and then how much of that bill does the client actually pay. And for difference between 2021's KPIs and 2022's KPIs is market. We saw the biggest leap in utilization rate ever, which a 6% year over year increase, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you add up billable time over the course of a year, especially when you're looking at like an average hourly rate of about $313, every minute actually adds to the firm's bottom line. And when we look at the collection rate, which in the past, we found that most lawyers with a collection rate of around 86% were only getting paid for 1.6 billable hours a day. In 2022, because lawyers have improved their collection methods, that's now jumped to 2 full hours a day of billable work is getting paid, about roughly a half hour extra a day.
And compare that to the first year of the survey.
It was 1.6.
1.6.
Yeah.
Which was, I remember I was at that talk when that number was, when Jack put that number out that year at the conference, and you could hear this gasp go across the audience.
And lawyers work hard all day, but they're not getting paid for all of that work, not directly anyway. And so that extra half hour a day, if completely utilized, we estimate could be an additional $36,000 in revenue for a law firm over the course of a year. And we think all of those improvements in those KPIs align with this leap in revenue collections that we're seeing this year.
Is that attributable in some way to the pandemic?
There's probably some business that has been carried forward, right? Things that just people held off on during the pandemic. But for law firms that rapidly mobilized onto the cloud, they really didn't miss that big a beat. I've been trying to see if there's a correlation between certain political things that we've seen, like the child tax credit that was a part of the recovery and then unfortunately expired, to see if that correlated with an increase and a drop in business. I haven't been able to find it. So we really think this might be just more people better utilizing law firms and law firms better organizing themselves to handle this increased demand.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, this idea that maybe some of it is people having held off on dealing with legal problems or hiring a lawyer, but I guess we will know maybe next year and see if there's a slump that comes along at that point. And you mentioned the billable hour. The billable hours, and one of the points of the survey is that it turns out that what lawyers are billing for their time has not kept pace with the consumer price index, right?
No. So the consumer price index, which is how we measure inflation, has risen roughly 8% throughout most of 2022. It got as high as 9% one month. And lawyer rates year over year have only increased 4%. And the same for non-lawyer rates. They've only increased 4% as well.
Yeah.
And so we see that the consumer price index has, for the first time, kind of exceeded the blended firm rate when we average everybody's billable time together. It hasn't quite come up to lawyer rates yet, but it's close. And if lawyers don't take this moment to evaluate either reducing their overhead to kind of deal with the cost of business increasing, or raise their rates to compete with the consumer price index, they're going to fall behind.
Yeah. Another impact of the pandemic on the legal profession has been changing attitudes about whether we should be working in an office and what our work environment should look like as professionals, what clients want from us. What did the survey tell us in that regard?
Well, we actually surveyed clients about 6 different factors that may impact hireability. And the most influential was not real estate or location, but whether or not you had good reviews online. So reputation is becoming more important than where you are.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a becoming. I don't think that's ever. I think that's always been the case.
Yeah.
I think clients hire lawyers based on, number one, they want to know they're hiring a good lawyer, right?
That's true, but I think we now have a wider source to pull from than ever before.
Yeah.
Right. It used to be friends and family.
Right.
Maybe you knew another lawyer.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that could give you a good reference.
Exactly. You'd ask your neighbor or a cousin or something.
And now we can ask the world.
Yeah.
And so lawyers do need to be more diligent about securing good reviews through good performance, but also encouraging their clients that these are the places that would be really impactful for us. If you liked our service, please, go ahead and give us 5 stars here.
Right. Right.
So reviews are the most impactful. What we saw next was location. So we saw that it had a 16% impact on decision making, or it was the most important 16% of the time. And
location meaning whether they are geographically adjacent or whether they have an office or not.
Yeah, that's actually the next point. Is what we found is 47% of clients wanted a lawyer who was in the same city, but 37% were fine with the lawyer just being in the same state.
Yeah.
And 31% said, I don't care where the lawyer is, so long as they're licensed to handle this problem.
Yeah.
And so if you're looking to be like a New York lawyer working from Alaska, there's going to be a client out there that will hire you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I assume that's related to practice areas. There's certain practice areas that it really doesn't matter where you are or where the client is. There are others that may be more of a factor, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Transactional practice areas tend to be a lot more broad in terms of what geographies apply. We still see for family law lawyers that location does matter, right? But availability is even more important. Availability and responsiveness is more important than proximity, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so
it makes total sense.
Yeah. So
we all know that feeling of not getting those return phone calls or whatever else.
So if you are a lawyer, as long as you can make it to the courthouse, right? Your client may be perfectly happy to work with you remotely on everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that in maybe last year or maybe the year before, I know the Legal Trends Report was kind of tracking the impact on the profession almost in real time in some ways during the time of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I remember Jack talking about it probably last year about the idea that the brick and mortar office is not quite dead, but on its last legs, perhaps. What are you seeing there? I mean, I hear what you're saying about some client that not being as much of a factor for clients, but do you think we are seeing a move away from the brick and mortar office, or are we at some kind of a stable pattern right now?
There's definitely a segment of Clio subscribers that is moving away from the bricks and mortar office, and I think what's more important is not that they're completely moving away from it, but they're determining that it's not really a place to work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we saw by measuring IP addresses, which is a security protocol at Clio, right? It enables us to figure out if somebody normally logs in from Wisconsin and now is suddenly logging in from Fiji, right? Is something wrong, or is there a vacation going on? And it's a security measure. But when we review these in aggregate, we saw that there are some patterns. If we assumed that any IP address with 3 users was an office or a shared workplace, we saw that there were groups now starting to emerge from Clio subscribing law firms. And there are some that are almost exclusively office, there are some that are mostly digital, but we saw this one category we're calling hybrid that had a huge change. Prior to 2020, 80% of their work was done in an office. And following 2020, only 35% of their work is done in the office. And they're moving to a distributed model, and they seem to be early adopters for what we think the new law firm is going to look like. Where you have an office, it might be where you meet with clients, it's where the nice boardroom is. It might be where you have the birthday parties and the training sessions with your team. But then the rest of the time, you're going to be working from home or from other locations. And that's where the work gets done.
Yep.
So I'm describing it as a law firm is no longer a location, but a state of mind.
Yeah.
And this group, this hybrid group, seems to have gotten their mind in the right place.
Yeah. Although interesting question, how long you can even continue that state of mind when lawyers if lawyers go completely hybrid. I mean, that some firms clearly continue to believe that there is identity around physical proximity, and that's one of the ways you can maintain firm culture. And there's this fear that if lawyers are not working in the office, it's going to be much more difficult to maintain a sense of culture within a firm.
Yeah. I
Whether
argue
that's true,
that culture is different than outputs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But culture leads to outputs.
Yeah.
Right? So finding the right culture for your clients, the type of talent you're looking to attract, that's going to be really important moving forward.
Yeah.
And those firms who want to be office only, they'll find lawyers who want to work there.
Right.
But those who can think a little more diverse in terms of how we work and where we work will have this huge pool of talent that is willing to make those changes alongside them.
Right. Speaking of talent, another topic that you talk about, and you've kind of already touched on it a little bit, but this question of how the lawyers themselves feel about being in the office or not being in the office, or what is important to them in seeking jobs, seeking fulfillment in their job. So what did you find in that regard?
Well, we found that close to 30% of lawyers are making changes in their careers. The 2 primary reasons that they've either left a job or are planning to leave a job are either better pay or better work-life balance. Those are equally tied at 37%.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Followed by a lot of relationship-based metrics, to be perfectly honest. Like, do I like my manager?
Yeah.
Do I like my law firm? Do I like my practice area?
Yeah.
And
in that one where the work life and pay are sort of equally equally factors, is that one that you've been tracking over time? And if so, has that changed over time?
So that is new this year, and we are going to keep tracking it over time. What I think we're seeing is there are lawyers who are either going to move jobs for more money, because it will impact their work-life balance in a negative way.
Yeah.
Or there are lawyers who are going to change firms for work-life balance, and the pay is not what's motivating them.
Yeah.
And depending on you as a law firm, that then gives you a differentiator, right? Are we the people who pay the most? Are we the Cravath system? Or are we the firm that really respects our attorneys and make sure that we provide a work-life balance and we staff appropriately for the work that we have on hand? And I think that's where firms can differentiate themselves. Now, in terms of what lawyers are preferring, 49% tell us that they're fine. They're just fine working from home. And I think that lines up with a lot of other surveys that we're seeing. The ABA just posted some similar numbers, for example.
Yeah.
One of Clio's unique legal trends numbers is 76% of lawyers are telling us they want to control when in the day they work.
Yeah.
And I think that's somewhat interesting.
Yeah.
Because when we look at when lawyers prefer to work and when they actually are working, there's a huge mismatch. We find that close to 28% of lawyers are working earlier in the day than they would prefer to be.
Yep.
And they're oftentimes working late in the day. In fact, we see about 10% of lawyers working after 11 at night. And so that means either they've got too much work and the firm isn't staffed appropriately, or that they're having trouble with that work-life balance that we've talked about.
Right.
Something in the day is making it impossible for them to finish their work.
Yeah.
Now, that may not be a bad thing. That may actually be their preferred working method, right? They want to be available for their kid when school gets out. Or when we had Daniel Pink and he talked about just like timing. Could be they're night owls. That's when they're most productive. But a firm that enables those types of choices is going to find a huge pool of lawyers who want to work in that model.
Yeah. That'll be another interesting one to track over the next few years and see how that plays out, because again, I hate to be cynical, but the work-life balance is something like the billable hours that lawyers have been talking about for years. We're going to get rid of the billable hour. We're going to have more work-life balance. Billable. We've seen what's happened with the billable hour. I mean, that
83% of matters in Clio still
is that right?
Yeah, still done at the billable hour.
Is that right?
And something like 97% of our law firms have matters that have billable hours.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
But a work-life balance, it does feel like there really has been a change over the last couple of years, because I think one thing the pandemic caused a lot of us to do was a lot more introspection about what's important and what's not important.
Yeah.
And to understand that I don't have to be in an office, I don't have to be working all the time, and I can still be successful in my job and in my career, and I can still have a family or whatever it is I want to do with my time. So I look forward to tracking that one and seeing how it evolves.
So one of the ways we describe it is maybe we should not think of it as work-life balance, but work-life blend. How am I blending both my life and work together to complement each other? And the example of the parent being available for their kid after school is the perfect example, right?
Yeah.
I can still get in 8 hours a day. It just might not be 8 hours contiguously.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we're going to be seeing in the future.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I just interviewed a customer of yours, the guys from the Vela law firm.
Oh my gosh, the amazing stories that they have of Portugal.
The amazing stories of sending their entire office to half of their office anyway to Portugal.
Yeah.
But the managing partner, I asked him about work-life balance at the firm. And I wish I could remember his exact answer because it was great. But basically, he was saying, we don't like to talk about it work-life balance. It's like work and life shouldn't be these sort of two separate things. They should be more integrated in a natural and fluid way.
Yeah.
So you're not always trying to balance these countervailing forces. They should kind of work together for each other in a way. And which was not for him to say we want people to work all the time. It was for him to say we want people to have lived lives that incorporate all sorts of things, and that's what we want in professionals at our firm.
Yeah, and we are professionals, right?
Yeah,
we do define ourselves in part by what we do.
Yeah.
So there's never going to be a way to divorce it.
Yeah.
I do think we should point out to your listeners they could find that episode from Villa Wood in the description below.
Yes, absolutely. So I wanted to, and I'm running a little long on this, but a couple of things, other things that I think they're interesting to my audience to talk about are the findings with regard to the impact of not just technology, but cloud-based technology on a law practice, and kind of preaching to the choir. I hope a little bit with some of my audience. But what did you find in that regard?
So, as part of our research, one of the things we asked was, just do you use a cloud-based legal practice management system? And we left it really open. It could be us. It could be our competitors. That wasn't the point of the question. But then when we asked various other questions, like how would you rate your relationship with your clients? How would you rate your relationships with your colleagues? How do you feel about time management? In every metric, firms that were using cloud-based legal practice management solutions were more satisfied or happier or had higher answers to all of those categories. When it comes to relationships with clients, it was 33% higher relationships with their clients by using a cloud-based practice management solution. It was, this one's off the top of my head, but I believe 24% higher for relationships with colleagues. And so they're just making it easier to have these relationships with each other, because it can be from your mobile phone, it can be from your laptop or your desktop computer. You don't have to track down that manila folder with the papers that you need on somebody's desk because it's in the cloud. And we even saw that they had higher salaries than firms that weren't using cloud-based practice management solutions. And that one prompted some further research. And what they were telling us is they have higher employee satisfaction, higher employee performance, and higher client satisfaction as well. And so what we're seeing is clients are gravitating towards these firms that are enabling lawyers to be flexible and communicative and to allow a collaborative interaction that you just may not get with kind of the quote-unquote traditional law firm.
Yeah.
And it was really gratifying to see as a cloud-based company.
Yeah,
right?
it's so funny sitting here having this conversation, talking about this, because of course 15 years ago, I think formally, the company launched, but 14 years ago you launched Clio. I was there. I was watching it then, and I heard the conversation, and I heard the conversation for many years, and you did too, in which people were questioning the cloud. People were questioning not just the safety and security, but the value and the why, whatever. And you know, here we are now. You know, 15 years is maybe it's a long time in some terms, but in terms of the legal profession, this is not a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder whether you guys at Clio all kind of go home at night and turn the lights out and start running around saying, "We told you so. We told you."
It's not quite that tone, but it is nice to be able to point to things like the American Bar Association's Legal Technology Survey, where they're showing that, you know, between 40 to 50% of all law firms are using like case management now.
Yeah.
And before that, you know, it would be like something like 60 to 70% are on pen and paper or using Outlook.
Right.
And so I think we've really hit a turning point where law firms are starting to recognize the value of these systems.
Yeah.
And now it's up to legal technology companies like Clio to live up to those expectations and really provide value moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm not catering to you by saying this because I've written it publicly on my blog any number of times, but I really think that Clio was one of the primary reasons that the entire legal profession came around to the cloud. I mean, it really helped drive understanding and adoption of the cloud. Not only Clio, other companies out there, but your messaging around it over the years has really been instrumental in making this happen. So good for you guys.
Thanks. I do think law firms still need to look for kind of legal specific cloud.
Yeah.
There is still some unique concerns to law firms.
Yeah.
So you can't just jump on anything, but the amount of reputable offerings that are out there now has just grown substantially, and it's really exciting to see.
Yeah. I think I've taken just about every last moment out of the time you had allotted for me here today, and I know you've got a very busy day, so I'm going to wrap it up. But anything else that you'd like to say about the survey before we...
About the legal trends report?
Or life in general, or whatever you want to talk about.
There's so much that we haven't talked about. We provide...
Clio.com/LTR, you can get it.
Yeah, Clio.com/LTR. You can find billable hour rates by state and by practice area. You can find those key performance indicators that I mentioned before, again, by practice area. So it really is a wealth of information that law firms can look at to hold up a mirror to themselves. And I'm really glad that we're able to provide this year over year and help move the industry forward.
Yeah. Well, Josh, thanks for taking this time with me today, and again, congratulations on your 10th anniversary with Clio, and I look forward to talking to you on your 20th anniversary.
Oh my gosh, that'd be amazing. I look forward to that too. Thanks,
All right.
Bob.
See ya.